Hi, I'm Indra, and I'd like to welcome you to the Messy Middle Matters, where my friends and I explore all the twists, turns, and challenges that arise in the messy middle of work. Last week was episode 52 of the Messy Middle Matters. So I thought this was a good time for me to call the season 1 done and for me to have a quarterly retro. It's a tool that I've used many, many times before. First created it when I was at WeWork. And I think it'll work for this. I think it'll work from this. Yes, I'm looking at a full year, and technically I label it the quarterly retro. But a retro is a retro for a long period of time. Same rules can apply. And yeah, I can do it by myself. I don't need to go through all the ground rules that I usually have. Don't worry, folks. I'll post a full Substack article next week. So follow me on LinkedIn and make sure you get that, or I'll post a link to my Substack in the show notes. So you'll get that next week. But I'll have a quarterly retro and talk about the last year and change with everyone. And go through the 3 questions that I usually go through in that quarterly retro. So the 3 questions are: what went well, what went poorly, and what started off poorly but improved over the course of time. The first 2 questions are classic ones. It sort of aligns with a stop, start, continue that usually happens in a classic sprint retro that you have. But that last one for me is always where the magic is, because when you're talking about a sustained period of time, celebrating the fact that you actually improved, something that falls in the messy middle of that time cycle, is usually where the good juice is. And so we're going to focus in on all 3 questions. So, what went well? I did the thing. It started off with Amanda. Shout out to her. It couldn't have happened without her, because when I first started the podcast, I didn't want to do it by myself. I really wanted to do it in collaboration with someone else. And we did. Most of the episodes are with her, right? At least half of them are with her. And it wouldn't have, I always talked about her like she's the godmother, a little bit. She's the godmother of the podcast. And I'm forever grateful for that. Over the course of time, determined that it was worth expanding to other folks so we could cover different topics, from different angles, cover them at different depths, just expand the aperture a little bit. And that was also an incredible set of learnings from that. And yeah, it's even threw in a solo episode out there just to see what that would be like. And all in all, 52 full-length episodes, started off on Zoom. So all the recording and editing was on Zoom. About halfway through, graduated onto a platform called Riverside. And someday I look forward to graduating back to Zoom again, because there are pros and cons and scenarios for all the different platforms. But I did along the way. So when I was recording on Zoom, I learned how to edit audio in GarageBand, learned a whole bunch of different plugins around mixing and mastering and all the other things. Heaven knows I still don't use all the terminology properly, but learned about that, learned about captioning, learned about SRT files, learned about how episodes can flow and the RSS feeds flow through the various channels, and how do you get your podcasts out on every single platform. I happen to use Podbean for everything. I'll share links for all that stuff just in case folks want to use them of those things. I figured out where social media falls into it. Still am publishing full episodes on YouTube. Not as great at getting the shorts out on time. Start off on TikTok and Blue Sky and Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is key since this is really around the business world, right? And then dialed things back to just LinkedIn and Instagram for a couple of different reasons, but those are the 2 platforms. And, when first started the episodes, didn't know how long this would go, decided to keep going and going and going. And a year later, when it was hitting the year anniversary, I was like, okay, let's hit 52. 52 is a good number. So that's a whole bunch of what went well. Oh yeah, guest release notes. I guess release notes, release forms. I entered my legal era on all of this. Um, how about what didn't go well? Um, Technology. Technology is so, 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 so hard. And what I will tell everyone, so in-person conversations, they can be richer, but the technology around them is a whole lot harder. Those consistent listeners will know there was that era of me having to re-record things because I couldn't get things to work properly. The recordings weren't going the right way because one mic was connecting, the other one wasn't. It was a little all over the place, and it was, despite the equipment technically being top notch, it can go sideways. So, lean back in a little bit on the remote stuff just because it took one less thing to not worry about. So I would still say technology is the hardest part of this. The consistency, the tenacity, I tend to be pretty good at that stuff. But the technology thing, as tech savvy as I can be, boy, do I daydream about having an engineer that's on site with me, whether it's renting out a studio or having them monitor everything as it's going on. That would be great. What would be great in the future is having a dedicated person for social media. I think I would do those in the reverse for a couple of different reasons, but sequencing wise. But the social media piece, like that's a whole nother skill set. So wore a lot of hats this year. Um, w- Number three, what started off poorly but improved over the quarter? This is where the juice is for me. So started the podcast for a whole bunch of reasons. I don't know how much I've gone into this in the episodes. I haven't looked back at everything from all the episodes, but for years I've been daydreaming about more stories getting told, especially the ones that don't often get told, whether they're because if it's from a gender perspective or if it's from a race perspective, which I can't represent, but I can help champion. Um, Whether it's from a skills and crafts perspective, because I happen to be part of a craft, like my core skill set tends to be one that's very behind the scenes, and we're not great at stepping on the spotlight. So I've always daydreamed about that being the case, that there being more voices like that. Um, Two things happened. One, I was like, okay, no one else is doing it, might as well do it. Because I can be that person who gets just like, okay, let's just do the thing. Let's just do the thing. I want the thing in the world. No one else is doing it. Let me just do it. Even if it's not my comfort zone. The other one, this is where my juice is. Um, I had a bunch of circumstances. One in particular comes to mind, but I had a bunch of circumstances that knocked the confidence out of me, knocked the confidence clear out of me. I was a shell of myself. I was an absolute shell of myself. Um, you wouldn't recognize me. I didn't recognize myself. And the reality is I wasn't walking through this world with the confidence of someone who's lived through the various things that I've lived through or have the skill sets that I have, or I didn't have the gravitas that I should have, right? Given everything that I bring to the table and bring into this world, right? And I needed to find my voice again. So the podcast really helped me find my voice, right? Yes, I did it through the podcast. Yes, I did it through my Substack. Yes, I did it through networking events, but the podcast was the one consistent thing, like every week having to get an episode out every single week, making sure that the content was clear, making sure that the content was useful, making sure that the topics were relevant, making sure that we were standing on that edge. 2025, 2026. There's a careful line that you got to walk for a whole bunch of different reasons. Walking that line as close to the edges as possible without cutting ourselves, because it feels like a razor's edge sometimes. Um, Figuring that out has been a gift, has been a gift. So I stand before you, or I stand, whether literally, figuratively, whether you're watching or listening, I stand before you a completely different human being than I was a year ago. And a large part of that is the podcast, and a large part of that is y'all. Yes, I'm from Jersey and I use y'all. That's a story for another day, but I love that word. But the It's because of the podcast that I'm able to walk in this world with the confidence that I do. I rediscovered myself. I rediscovered things about myself that I didn't even realize existed. And a lot of why I kept going, a lot of why that was possible, a lot of why I stayed committed was because of the feedback from all of you. I often say in work environments, I'm like, I really appreciate feedback. It's not because I need a pat on the back, because I really don't, but I do like to know what's useful, what's not. Right? Because that gives me the signal that I need to know. I keep doing this, I stop doing that. Right? And the feedback that I've received from friends, from former colleagues, from current colleagues, from strangers, right? The way that my network has opened up is huge. Um, and I'm grateful to all of you. I'm grateful to all of you. So that's what started off poorly and improved over the quarter was my self-confidence. And, this technically is episode 53 then. It'll mark the end of season 1. Will every season be a year long? Probably not. I can probably guarantee not. But, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that this one was a long one because it allowed for a lot to take root. And so for now, I'm gonna do a slightly longer retro, off camera, off microphone, to figure out what's next for the podcast, figure out how this evolves and grows. How does this fit into my personal and professional life, right? Which is evolving and growing along with everything else. Stay tuned. Connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm going to post about it on LinkedIn when it shows up again. Connect with me on Instagram, The Messy Middle Matters, the whole long phrase. Worked on getting a trademark. That was a win for the year. I got my trademark. And, just stay connected. Stay connected. I'll let y'all know when the next season drops, or stay subscribed. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all of them. That's the good news. Took that route. And just thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the year plus. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your support. And I do hope you'll join us next time for another topic for the messy middle. Bye, everyone. Thanks for taking time with us in the messy middle. Word of mouth remains the most powerful way for people to find us. If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, download a few episodes, and share it with someone else who's navigating the in-between. Do you have ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find our feedback form at themessymiddlematters.com or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This work is better when we do it together. Until next time.